The door to Damien Voss's office was made of solid glass, and Claire Eden had always thought that was deliberate. A man like him wanted people to see him before they reached him, wanted them to feel small before they even knocked. She didn't knock. She pushed it open, walked in, and set a manila folder down on his desk with a steadiness that surprised even her. Her hands weren't shaking. She had expected them to shake. Damien stood at the window with his back to her, a glass of whiskey held loosely at his side. He didn't turn around. He already knew who it was. He always knew. "I found the file," Claire said. Silence. "I saw the photo, the original one, the one your fixer pulled before you had me brought in." Her voice was quiet, precise, like she had rehearsed it 100 times and decided that calm was the only weapon she had left. "You chose me because of my face, because I look like her." Damien turned then, slowly. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight and his eyes, those cold, controlled eyes, were doing something she had never seen them do before. They were searching, like a man looking for an exit and finding none. "You didn't hire me," Claire continued. "You built a costume and put me inside it." He said nothing. She had expected a denial, a deflection, some version of the cold precision he used to shut every conversation down before it could touch him. Instead, he stood there and said absolutely nothing, and somehow that silence was worse than anything he could have said. It confirmed everything. It broke something in her that she hadn't even known was still fragile. She looked at him for one long moment, really looked, the way she had quietly been doing for weeks without letting herself admit it, and then she picked up nothing, said nothing more, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. Damien didn't move. If you're already feeling this story, hit that like button and subscribe, because it only gets deeper from here. 3 weeks earlier, Damien Voss was not a man who believed in accidents. Everything in his life was a decision. Every outcome was engineered. That was how he had rebuilt Voss Industries from the wreckage Victoria Crane had made of it, methodically, coldly, without sentiment. Victoria had been his fiancée. She had also been the woman who handed 2 years of his most sensitive corporate strategy to his biggest rival, smiled at their engagement party 3 days later, and disappeared with his business partner the morning the story broke. The financial damage had been significant. The public humiliation had been total. But it was the betrayal, the intimate, surgical precision of it, that had calcified something inside him permanently. Or so he believed. When his fixer Marcus laid the file on his desk that Tuesday morning, Damien almost didn't open it. Marcus had been known to be dramatic. But then he saw the photograph clipped to the inside cover, and he went very still. Same bone structure, same mouth, same quiet intensity in the eyes. Different woman entirely, that much was obvious even from a photograph. Where Victoria wore everything on the surface, this woman seemed to hold everything inward, like someone who had learned early that the world didn't deserve all of her. Her name was Claire Eden, 29, an architect working for a mid-size firm downtown, freelancing on the side to cover medical debt left behind by her mother's illness. No connections to his world, no agenda, just a face that fate had carelessly duplicated. "She needs money," Marcus said simply, "and you need a weapon." Damien closed the file, set up a meeting. Claire had told herself she was being practical. The number Damien's office had offered was not a number a person in her position said no to. It would clear her mother's debt entirely and leave enough to breathe for the first time in 2 years. All she had to do was serve as a personal companion, attend events, be present, sign a discretion agreement. The contract was thorough and cold and read like something designed by a man who trusted nothing. She signed it anyway. She noticed things about Damien Voss from the very first day. She noticed that his staff moved around him the way people moved around something that had once burned them. She noticed the pale rectangle on the hallway wall where a portrait had recently been removed. She noticed that he watched her sometimes with an expression she couldn't name, not warmth exactly, but something adjacent to recognition, like a man seeing something familiar in a place he hadn't expected it. He had her styled within the first week. A personal shopper arrived at the apartment he'd arranged for her. The clothes were beautiful and expensive and felt faintly like a costume. She wore them because she had agreed to. She did not pretend they were hers. The first event was a private dinner with 3 of Damien's investors. She sat beside him and said very little, which seemed to be what was required. But halfway through the evening, one of the investors made a cutting remark to a junior member of the serving staff, something casual and cruel about competence. And Claire set down her wine glass and said, quietly but clearly, that she didn't think that was a kind thing to say. The table went silent. Damien looked at her, not with irritation, with something she couldn't read. The investor laughed it off. The evening moved on. But later in the car, Damien said nothing for a long time and then said, almost to himself, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Claire said. "That's why I did it." He didn't respond, but she saw something shift in his expression before he turned to look out the window, something brief and unguarded that he shut down almost immediately. She filed it away and said nothing. The moment that stayed with her happened on a Thursday night 3 weeks in. She had been given access to his library, a room she suspected no one used, and she had spread her own sketches across the reading table alongside 3 of his architecture books, cross-referencing details for a freelance pitch she was quietly still working on. She hadn't meant to fall asleep. She woke to the soft weight of a blanket across her shoulders. Damien was already at the door, his back to her, clearly intending to leave without waking her. He didn't know she was awake. She watched him pause for just a moment, one hand on the doorframe, his head slightly turned as if he'd thought of something and then decided against it. And then he walked out and pulled the door quietly behind him. Claire lay still for a long time after that. The blanket smelled faintly of cedar. She stared at the ceiling and told herself it meant nothing and knew, with a sinking certainty, that she was lying to herself. She liked him. She had liked him for longer than she wanted to admit, not the version he performed for the world, but the version that appeared in unguarded moments, the one who covered her without waking her, the one who had looked at her in that car like she had said something that landed somewhere deep and unexpected. She buried it. She was an employee. She had signed a contract. Whatever she had started to feel was a liability she could not afford. Marcus warned him on a Friday morning, leaning against the doorframe of Damien's office with his arms folded, and the particular expression he wore when he thought Damien was making a mistake, but knew better than to say it directly. "You're off schedule," Marcus said. "The quarterly event is in 2 weeks. We haven't made a single move toward the actual plan." Damien didn't look up from his desk. "I'm aware." "Are you?" Marcus let that sit for a moment. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks less like a revenge strategy and more like you've given a woman free run of your library and started caring whether she sleeps comfortably." Damien looked up then. His voice was flat. "She is an employee. Nothing has changed." Marcus nodded slowly in the way that meant he disagreed entirely but had chosen his battles. "If you say so." After he left, Damien sat very still. He picked up his pen, set it down, stood and walked to the window and looked out at the city the way he always did when something was pressing on him that he didn't want to name. He had built this plan with precision. Claire was supposed to be a tool, a face that would unsettle the people who had watched him fall, a silent message to Victoria and everyone aligned with her that he was untouchable and in control. It was clean. It was logical. It required nothing from him emotionally because she was not supposed to matter. Except she had started to matter in ways he had no architecture for. It wasn't the face. He had almost forgotten about the face entirely, which disturbed him more than he would admit. What he kept returning to was the way she had silenced a table full of powerful men with 9 quiet words and not even blinked afterward. The way she asked him questions that had no manipulation behind them, just genuine, unguarded curiosity, like she actually wanted to know who he was beneath the construction. The way she made his house feel inhabited, lived in. Like somewhere a person actually existed rather than operated from. He told himself he was observing, monitoring, that it was relevant to the plan. He knew he was lying. He doubled down the following Monday. He reminded Claire formally that the quarterly event required her full presence and specific preparation. His tone was clipped and professional, and he watched her receive it with that particular stillness she had, absorbing everything, revealing nothing, and something about her composure made him feel, irrationally, like the smaller person in the room. "Is there something else?" he asked, because she hadn't moved to leave. "Yes," Claire said. "I want to know why you really hired me." The air shifted. "I told you why," Damien said. "I needed a companion for professional engagements. It's in the contract." "I know what's in the contract." Her eyes held his steadily. "That's not what I'm asking." He looked at her for a long moment, long enough that any other person would have filled the silence, would have retreated or softened the question. Claire did neither. She simply waited, with a patience that felt almost unbearable, like she had all the time in the world and intended to use it. "You're overthinking it," Damien said finally. She studied him for one more second. Then she nodded, not the nod of someone who believed him, but the nod of someone who had just confirmed exactly what they suspected, and she left. Damien stood in the center of his office alone and felt, for the first time in 3 years, genuinely exposed. Victoria Crane reappeared on a Wednesday, which felt appropriately calculated. Her photo surfaced first, a society column, her arm looped through the arm of Aldrich Novick, Damien's most significant rival, both of them photographed at a charity event with the particular ease of people who wanted to be seen. By Thursday evening she had made contact with Claire directly, a message to her personal phone, a suggestion of coffee, a tone that was warm and careful and precisely engineered. Claire went. She told herself it was information, that she was being smart. Victoria was exactly as beautiful in person as her photographs suggested, and exactly as deliberate. She ordered for both of them without asking and then leaned forward with an expression of practiced concern and told Claire that she deserved to know the truth. That Damien had chosen her for her face. That there was a file. That Claire was not a companion but a prop in a plan that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with a grudge Victoria claimed she had never fully understood. "He's using you," Victoria said simply. "I thought someone should tell you." Claire looked at her across the table, at the performance of sincerity, at the careful timing of this revelation, at the way Victoria watched her for a reaction with eyes that were slightly too alert for someone who claimed to be acting out of kindness, and said, "Thank you for the coffee," and left. She went back to Damien's house. She found the filing cabinet in Marcus's adjoining office that she had noticed weeks ago and never opened. It took her 11 minutes to find the file. When she opened it and saw the original photograph, her own face staring back at her, clipped and clinical, a tool assessed for utility, she sat with it for a long time. She didn't cry. She had used up crying on things that deserved it more. She picked up the file and she walked to Damien's office, and she pushed open the glass door without knocking.
"You chose me
And she
because of my
said what she
face.
had come to
Because
say.
I look like her?"
After she left, Damien did not move for a very long time. The city darkened outside his window. Marcus appeared once in the doorway, read the room, and disappeared without speaking. The whiskey glass sat untouched on the desk. The file sat where Claire had placed it, its edges perfectly aligned, like even in her devastation she couldn't help being precise. He had won nothing. He understood that now with a clarity that felt almost punishing. Victoria was irrelevant. The plan was hollow. 3 years of careful reconstruction and he had built himself a cage and called it strategy. He pulled up Claire's professional portfolio on his laptop, something he had looked at once when Marcus first brought him her file and never returned to. He went through it slowly this time. Her work was extraordinary. quiet and structural and full of an instinct for space that couldn't be taught. He found the pitch she had been developing, a community architecture project, a submission she had been working on in the evenings in his library, and he found the date of the presentation she had missed. The date she had missed because she had been standing beside him at his quarterly event, because she had honored a contract he had written in bad faith. He picked up his phone, made 2 calls, asked for nothing in return, and made sure his name was not attached to either. Claire found out on a Tuesday. Her firm's director called her, surprised and pleased, to tell her the selection committee had agreed to reopen her submission, that someone had gone to considerable effort to make the case for a second look. The director didn't know who. Claire had a feeling. She stood outside Damien's building for 10 minutes before she went in. He was in the library when she found him, standing at the table where she had fallen asleep, her sketches no longer there but the architecture books still open, like he had been looking at them. He turned when she entered, and neither of them spoke for a moment. Claire went first. She told him that from the very beginning, before she understood who he really was beneath everything he performed, something in her had already started, that she had liked him, not the version constructed for boardrooms and intimidation, but the version that appeared in the spaces between, the one who covered her with a blanket without waking her, the one who looked at her in the car that night like she had reached something he kept walled off. She told him she had buried it because she was afraid she was only a face he needed, afraid that if she let herself feel it fully it would destroy her when it ended. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he told her the truth, that he hadn't fallen in love with her the way he had expected anything to happen to him ever again, that it had come in slowly, without permission, in the way she argued without fear, in the way she made his house feel like somewhere a person actually lived, in the way she looked at him like he wasn't broken, just unfinished. He told her that by the time he understood what it was he was already gone, and that it had terrified him because he didn't know how to love someone without a plan. The space between them closed the way inevitable things do, not rushed, not performed. He reached for her hand first. She didn't pull away. When they kissed, it was soft and unhurried, like 2 people who had already survived the hardest part and had nowhere left to be except here. Afterward, he asked quietly if she would let him take her somewhere, a real date, no contract, no role, just them. She looked at him for a moment, really looked, the way she always had, the way that had undone him from the very beginning, and allowed the smallest smile. Don't be late. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment below telling me your favorite moment, and subscribe to Wacky Storytime TV so you never miss a story. See you in the next one.